Hello and welcome back to the Napoleonic Wars pod, where today, well, I say we've broken out the fancy dress. One of us has broken out the fancy dress, and the others have come suitably equipped. Equipped might be an overly generous term, perhaps not intellectually equipped, but in terms of Christmas festive spirit and all of that fun stuff. Two of my guests have made the effort, and the Grinch here hasn't really bothered. So we are back for another installment of the Battle of the Marshals. In this episode, Bernadotte, Victor, Suchet, and Murat will go head to head in one of the oddest duels and one of the most bad-tempered groupings of marshals that I think you could ever hope to achieve. If you stuck the four of them in a bar, I'm going to gamble on the fact that not all of them are making it out alive. But if nothing else, Murat is going to look good whilst he's doing it. On the subject of looking good, I'm going to double back to this is very bad presenting already. We've even had a 24-hour break since the last installment, and I still haven't got my shit together. When it comes to looking suitably Murat-esque, Josh Proven isn't sporting ostrich feathers, I must say, but has pulled out the stylish cravat. The waistcoat remains, but the cravat has replaced the bow tie, which is a very elegant solution to the fact that you didn't want to tie that wretched bow tie for a second time. How are you doing, Josh? Good to see you.
I'm doing well, and those of you who are tuning in, following the course of these episodes will realize this is a 24-hour cycle has passed because my voice has degraded considerably.
I will neither confirm nor deny whether a solid 3-hour recording session on the previous three episodes might be responsible for that. Folks, if you haven't checked out the Adventures in Historyland YouTube channel, please sort it out. It's Christmas. You've got nothing to do because you've gorged yourself on mince pies and turkey. So if you want to vegetate that off, because that's definitely a solution to having eaten a tad too much over the Christmas period, the Adventures in Historyland YouTube channel will help you scratch that itch. Equally, you probably got some nice money for Christmas. Money is usually nice. I don't know why I said nice money. I'm wondering if the hat is the problem. The hat might have to get the heave ho. Perhaps the hat is distracting me. But yes, if you got some money for Christmas and don't know what to spend it on, I have a solution for you. Go to hellion.co.uk and search for Bullocks, Grain and Good Madeira on the Marshall and Jack campaigns and Every Hazard and Fatigue on the Siege of Pensacola. There you go. I spent your money for you. You're very welcome. Equally not to be outdone, and in fact it's Sam's fault that I decided to break out the stupid hat in the first damn place, because Sam texted me saying I want to wear something glittery to out Josh, and I was like, well, good luck. But Sam has clearly, you've gone for velvet, which is an interesting solution to the problem, but you do look sort of very hostess. I could see sort of you and Josh hosting some kind of soiree somewhere, and all of your guests peering down your nose at me because I have done, what did you describe it as?
Popped on your fancy dress hat in the corner like a little child because mummy said you could if you were a good boy and didn't disturb the adults.
That's not an entirely inaccurate assessment of the situation. I hate to admit it, but yes. Sam Jolly.
FYI, also look out for our new band, Velvet and Silk.
Oh, I see. So I'm what, the facilitator here. Where's my agent's fee? Where's the cut that I get for, putting the two of you together? Come on.
It's
I'm not
all
doing
it's
this for the fun of
like
it.
1% or something.
1% of something is still something. It's probably more than I make out of most other history related stuff. So I'll take it. There we go. Sam Jolly, creator of the Royal Logistic Corps Museum, Worthy Down, Winchester. Expert on all things logistic and logistics. There is a difference, I'm told, only because she's told me off for getting it wrong in the past. And also formerly assistant curator at the Royal Engineers Museum. She knows her way around military corps. Great to see you both. Thank you for agreeing to a second installment of this. Because it's Christmas, we're going to continue with the anarchy that was that parlor game that you all need in your life that will be patented for next Christmas, probably. definitely not. What is your favorite marshal? But we've exhausted our repertoire of favorite marshals, which means we now need to do least favorite marshals in order to expose inherent biases, because this is a scientific process on this podcast, in case you hadn't realized already. So we'll
It's
save.
like Neil deGrasse Tyson is in the room.
It really is, isn't it? It's really not. It's really not. We will save my least favorite marshal for the next installment, partly because it gives me an additional amount of time to work out who is my least favorite marshal. Although most of you are probably thinking it's a done deal, but I may surprise you in the next episode. Wait and see. There's a teaser for you. Now, Sam is rather miffed at the latest iteration of this parlor game, because apparently she let slip in the previous segments of recording who her least favorite marshal is. And it's a memo that I might have slightly dropped. So the rules of this highly complex and technical game are that we get to ask one question before we make our assessments. We'll play this for Sam and for Josh. So my question to Sam is your least favorite marshal, is your decision there influenced by your LAN obsession?
I cannot choose between my children. Do not make me choose.
But if they're your least favorite marshal, then surely that's a done deal. They're not your children.
All of the marshals are my children. All of them.
So sounds a lot like Napoleon, something Napoleon would say.
I was gonna say that. Have we had a séance with Bonaparte in the last 24 hours? I mean, you're wearing earrings that I did rather unkindly describe as Murat's balls. So at this stage, I wouldn't put anything past you. For those of you who are listening on the YouTube channel, Sam isn't literally wearing Murat's testicles. What she's wearing is Christmas pudding earrings. But it was a joke that was too good to pass up, given that Murat's in this episode. But come on, no, I've got to hold you to it. Least favorite marshal. So in response to my question, is your least favorite influenced by a LAN association?
No.
Oh, damn. Okay, that's the problem. Okay, I am at this point stumped. But knowing you, anybody who, inverted commas, betrayed Napoleon, otherwise known as seeing the light, realizing that he was an idiot and not in the best interest of France, and therefore putting the needs of the country and the army before their emperor.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna have a stab at this and go Marmont. No. Okay, Josh, your turn.
Is he a cavalryman?
No.
Okay. Well, that eliminates Grouchy, and you were never going to have Murat as your least favorite. Let's be honest. I don't know why I'm doing this out loud again. This is really bad tactics. If you're playing this at home, don't play it the way I play it, because I'm just giving Josh ammunition by working through the logic of this situation. This is difficult.
I have difficulties choosing a least favorite marshal because I'm fairly apathetic about disliking people, and
Oh, this is obvious. Of course, this is obvious. It's Bernadotte.
Yes, but remember, I said this is like choosing between my favorite children. So when you say least favorite marshal, you're thinking someone you actually hate. When I'm saying least favorite marshal, I'm like, oh well, of my children, he has, probably not done the most favorable things in my eyes as the others. Like I don't hate him. I definitely don't hate him. I just don't love him as much as the others. And obviously the fact that he was your favorite last time instantly makes me want to hate him because I'm the most vexing person in your life.
Mm-hmm. It has been known. It has been known.
I do love you. I'm just not in love with you.
I love you, just not like I love Lan. That's the subtext here.
Exactly. And I also don't think Bernadotte would be too bothered by that. And also, I will add, I did nearly name my cat Bernadotte. So that proves that I don't hate him.
Yeah, but instead you went for Joseph, who's the lame brother.
No, it's Joseph after Josephine.
Well, yes, because you misgendered your cat initially. That's a whole other conversation. It's Josh's turn at this point. Sam, I'll let you go first with the questions.
Is he traitorous scum?
I doubt any more so than the others.
Oh
damn
no, that's a dodge. I'm going to put my foot down as the independent adjudicator.
Oh, come on.
That's a dodge. That's a
They were
swerve.
all traitors at some point.
No, you have to be more explicit in the spirit of Sam's question.
I don't believe he is one of the classic traitors, no.
That's even more awkward an answer than when I asked you in a different episode whether your favorite one had betrayed Napoleon and served the Bourbons. And you went, well, he betrayed Napoleon, but he never served the Bourbons, I would say. So
Yes.
That is a
It was true.
disconcertingly good impression of Josh, actually.
if Josh was a dragon and I was some kind of medieval hero
Whoa,
trying to
where are we
guess
going
his
now?
riddles to get to treasure, I would die instantly because Josh would just give me weird riddles that I would never ever even be able to understand what he meant, let alone how to answer them.
Are you
Oh,
implying
dear.
that Josh is Gollum out of The Hobbit and that you are Bilbo Baggins trying to guess your way out of that cavern?
Let me think. There's a lot of I'll own it. There's a lot of them. Let me think. Just think clearly if he's okay. You can call him a traitor. Go on. Yes.
Oh, that complicates things. Because he wasn't a traitor, but then now he is a traitor.
Well, it's more like I said he wasn't one of the famous traitors. He's not one of the the ones who are known for being traitors. You know, I didn't want to confuse it that way either. But yes, technically, he can be deemed a traitor. I'm sure Bonapartists think of him as a traitor.
So if you're listening to this trying to pick up tips on pro strategies to win this game of martial guessing roulette, what you just witnessed there was a pro play, because I probed Josh for more information that has now influenced my decision without actually explicitly asking a question. So there you go. If you need that help around the Boxing Day dinner table, you are very welcome. Just make sure that you name the move after me. That's all I ask. Sam, what? What's your move? What's your guess?
Oh, I mean, the fact that Bonapartists hate him as a traitor, I might go with Marmont.
See, he's one of the famous traitors, I'm afraid. He's like, literally his name in France is Mud because of this. So I'm afraid not. My guy's a little more of a vague traitor, but mostly because I don't think a lot of people know that he was a traitor at the end.
McDonald?
No.
Okay. That's told me. What is my question?
The dragon has spoken.
You didn't even sugarcoat it for me. You were just absolutely brutal.
No, get out of here.
Leave, child. Go back to your corner with your silly hat. Are they known for their flamboyance and ostentation?
Not that I'm aware of any more than the others, but
okay. That doesn't answer my question. I thought
apologies if it turns out that he is.
Well, I mean, clearly it's not going to be Murat now,
again,
right? Because everybody.
No, I have no massive problem with Murat.
That wasn't my guess, though.
Wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. That was literally the point of my question, was to eliminate Murat from contention, which is why it's a dumb question. What I just did there deliberately was show you how to not play this game, because this is what really matters in this episode. I really do not know, and I am losing the will to live, quite frankly. So I am
happens a lot when I play games.
I am going to say Jourdan.
Yeah,
That's a
I'm afraid
dumb
not. I'm afraid not.
suggestion, frankly.
Jourdan saved France. He's
Exactly.
interesting.
As soon as the word came out of my mouth, I just like, no, that's stupid. Of course, Josh is going to like Jourdan. Okay, Sam, it's all yours.
Is he in this episode?
No, 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 no,
You
no,
had
no,
two
no.
questions.
No, you get one question. Each person gets a question. You've had your question. You went first. So you have to guess regardless.
You keep changing these rules as we go along. Okay.
I am aggrieved by that suggestion of corruption.
Where's the hat?
The Riddle Master Dragon would not like it. I'm going to just take a stab in the dark then and go with Victor.
Bingo.
Oh, well played. You nearly slapped your laptop across the room there. And considering that you fell flat on your face last night after 3 hours of podcasting in an effort to not squish your cat,
Yes.
you're not doing very well in the last 24 hours, but congratulations.
Correct guess.
Is that the first one that you've guessed?
Yeah.
First one anybody's guessed, actually, I think.
I think I got one of the ones in the previous.
You got Bernadotte for me today.
Okay.
I know it's been a tough sort of 5 minutes, but
it really has. It really has. I'm not sure I'm in the zone to attempt this, but folks, we have drawn out this torturous introduction long enough. It is time now to get to business. We have heavyweights all round, quite frankly. Even if you're sort of looking down this list and kind of going, oh, but somebody like Suchet, Victor, are they really heavyweights? Yes, they are, as we will establish in due course. Bernadotte faces off against Victor, faces off against Suchet, all of whom are forced into the corner by the sheer animal magnetism that is Murat and his deeply impressive ostrich feather thigh game. I'm ditching the hat. It's happening. I'm blaming the hat entirely for the anarchy thus far. And we're going to see if that resolves the situation. It blatantly won't. But we will start with with my favorite Marshal, the only person to win the Napoleonic Game of Thrones. Not my line, Rachel Stark's, but I've stolen it at this point. Very sorry, Rachel, but it was too good to pass up. We are, of course, talking about Bernadotte, who is championed by Alexander Mikaberidze.
1799, France is in crisis. A new coalition of European powers has formed against her. French armies have suffered a series of stunning setbacks. Political opposition, both right and left, has grown steadily at home. Economic malaise has deepened. The French government is facing such widespread disapproval that its own members are hopeful to find a capable man to take charge of the situation before it turns dire. The armies of the Republic were disheartened and dejected, remembered one of the directors. The generals were discontent, the soldiers worn out and depressed. What was wanted was a man who possessed the confidence of the army and reputation founded upon the character and achievement. Such a man was, no, the director did not mean Bonaparte, not at all. He actually referred to Bernadotte, Jean-Baptiste Jules Bernadotte, one of the brilliant generation of French generals raised by the tumultuous forces of the French Revolution and sent forth by the energy of revolutionary war to dominate Europe for over a decade. In 1797, Bernadotte found himself leading reinforcements to Italy, where he came face to face with Bonaparte. Both set in their own waves, self-assured, driven. No wonder they didn't see eye to eye. In 1799, while Napoleon was still in Egypt and the French Republic faced a crisis, the directors made Bernadotte a minister of war to deal with a national emergency. His ministry didn't last long, but he showed much talent and energy in this position, raising supplies and recruits and reviving the waning fires of military enthusiasm and civic patriotism. And yet, Bernadotte was the victim of his own success. Just a month after his appointment, Emmanuel Sieyès, the director and the key architect of what would be Napoleon's famous 18th Brumaire, complained that the war minister had become too successful, too popular. There were, remembered Chateaubriand, only 4 men capable of barring Bonaparte's path to power: namely Barras, Sieyès, Moreau, and Bernadotte. Bonaparte outsmarted the first three of them, but Bernadotte resisted him, despite the close connection he had to the Bonaparte family and in spite of Napoleon's repeated offers. "If you wish to be one of my friends," he told Bernadotte, "you will be very welcome." "Ha! Good friendship is possible," replied Bernadotte, "but you will always be the most imperious of masters." And this sentence is the key to understanding Bernadotte's entire life. He felt little disposed to become a pliant instrument of Napoleon's ambition. He did serve him and handsomely benefited from it, but always remained clear-eyed about who he was dealing with. Of all the marshals, Bernadotte was least inclined to yield to Napoleon that servile deference that the emperor so strictly exacted in later years. As Marshal of Empire, Bernadotte led the left wing of the Grand Army in 1805, 1807, the vanguard in 1806. His performance at Austerlitz, Halle, Lübeck, Ratkov are praiseworthy indeed. While much has been made of his alleged failure to support Davout at Auerstadt in October 1806, a close reading of Napoleon's orders and examination of terrain shows that such criticism is unwarranted. Bernadotte himself had a good reason for complaining that Napoleon purposefully entrusted him the command of foreign rather than French troops. Bavarians in 1805, Poles in 1807, Dutch and Spaniards in 1808, Poles and Saxons in 1809. Was this reflection of an emperor's concern for a man who had a knack for winning hearts and minds? Whenever invested with independent command, Bernadotte gained distinction and success. He was methodical while campaigning, attentive to comfort of his troops, and when the occasion required, showed great resourcefulness, energy, daring, as was the case in Tübingen in 1796, at Halle and Lübeck in 1806. What made him stand out among the marshals was Bernadotte's diverse experiences. Whenever Napoleon needed a capable administrator, Bernadotte seemingly was his choice, for he demonstrated a combination of qualities that Napoleon valued highly: initiative and analysis, firmness and efficiency, alongside tact and humanity. Such was the case with his appointment as the governor of Hanover in 1804, of Ansbach in 1806, of Hanseatic towns in 1807, the head of the French occupational forces in Denmark in 1808. When the tide began to turn against Napoleon, Bernadotte was the only marshal who was marked out by public opinion as being capable of succeeding the emperor. While appreciating Bernadotte's talents, Napoleon also kept an ever-watchful eye on him. "You've never seen a man or received a letter without my knowledge," he warned him. Bernadotte knew as much, which is why he must have been surprised when his name was considered by the representative of Sweden, who assembled to find successor to their childless king. Their choice looks less startling in hindsight. Bernadotte has consistently shown his consideration and generosity towards the conquered enemy, including the Swedish prisoners, whom he treated with such kindness. Just 4 years later, Napoleon was a former emperor, while Bernadotte was a victorious ruler of Sweden, Norway, and the founder of a dynasty that still reigns in Sweden. He was never the protege of Napoleon in the sense in which Joseph, Louis, Jérôme, Murat were. The Swedes selected him as their candidate on his own merits. And Bernadotte insisted on his own terms in dealing with Napoleon. That is why Napoleon said at St. Helena, "I cannot say that Bernadotte betrayed me. I can accuse him of ingratitude, but not of treachery." In March of 1844, when Bernadotte finally passed away at the age of 81, one of his obituaries concluded, "The commerce and manufacturing of Sweden have doubled, agriculture improved, instruction diffused, finances raised from a state of great embarrassment to complete prosperity, national debt almost paid off, and so on. Bernadotte found Sweden exhausted by centuries of foreign war. He has left her at the head of secondary powers of Europe and well prepared to uphold her interest and her dignity." Who is Napoleon's greatest marshal? How do we define greatness? In seeking answers, we should look beyond the battlefield, for marshals should not be assessed just for their tactical brilliance. Masséna, Lannes, Davout, Ney, they are all undoubtedly gifted commanders. But what do we make of them away from the din of the battle? What is their legacy in politics, culture, society, economy? When looked through such wider lens, Bernadotte appears towering over his comrades. In the words of his biographer, it was as a brave soldier that Bernadotte built up his reputation, but it was as a statesman that he did his greatest accomplishment.
Alex Mikaberidze there championing Bernadotte in an inestimable fashion. And I should just say there was a very strict time limit on all pitches. Alex sent me 11 minutes of material. And so if you're listening to that thinking it's a tad disjointed, it's because I had to be brutal and fair to the others and cut things down a bit. So apologies to Alex. What I will do is put Alex's full pitch, because it is really interesting, on YouTube as a separate file for you guys to watch should you be interested. So please do have a little look at the full length version if you'd like to hear the full thing. Bernadotte, adept politician, Napoleon's equal. He's certainly the closest, I would say, to being Napoleon's equal on a couple of measures. There are individuals who could make an argument about, in very specific circumstances, are they Napoleon's equal? But I think on a couple of, in some respects, actually, he's Napoleon's. No, I'm not going to go so far. I'm not going to be so anti-Bonapartist as to say that Bernadotte had a bigger legacy than Napoleon, because that would be factually incorrect. The code, if nothing else. But he's certainly the closest to being Napoleon's equal. I would argue he's the most strongly principled by a significant margin. Now, you could turn around and say, yes, but Zach, that's not particularly impressive when you've got people like Victor and Masséna and Murat in contention here. Capable commander, but my problem with him is that he doesn't shine significantly. I was very pleased to hear Alex kind of make that argument of ungrateful, but not a traitor, which of course is Napoleon's own assessment of the situation. So take note, avid Bonapartists. There's a hint there for you. Your own fanboy person idolization effigy thing even says this. Those were deeply technical terms. I promise you I haven't been on the mulled wine, all right? But I don't know, is he on another plane to the other marshals because he ruled? That's perhaps my problem. And Alex's argument is very clever in that sense that, look, when it comes to Bernadotte, you've got to judge him differently. And he's the only one who you kind of can put into that category, with the exception of Murat. Murat has the opportunity, but certainly lacks the inclination. And the other issue, of course, with Bernadotte is I don't think he's going to win the public vote. I really don't. You've got Murat in this heat. And we know my biases here. I am Team Bernadotte. So Josh, Sam, help me out. How do we assess Bernadotte? I mean, Sam, I'm going to come to you first because you're going to be peevish and negative because you don't like Bernadotte. He's that child that you pretend to like, but secretly deep down, you are just crushingly disappointed in. So come on, let's hear the shade that you want to cast against Bernadotte.
I think he's still a strong contender, but I can see why you like him, Zach, because he's very balanced. He's the, as Alex said, a battlefield commander and an excellent statesman. He's a half and a half. He's not garish. He doesn't charge into things. He doesn't dress flamboyantly, which I don't see why this keeps coming up as being a negative trait, being flamboyant. we could all do with an ostrich feather. I think an ostrich feather makes everyone a happier person, and if you're a happier person, then I think you're going to be a better battlefield commander. But never mind. So I can see why you like him. He is far more measured than perhaps some of the other marshals. But that's probably why they then all work together as a good team, because you need you need the balances. You need the well, I'll save that for the Murat one, but you need the flamboyant brave people versus the calm collected ones. It's just how teams work. And he's a diverse guy, and he does really good at the admin. Being a good administrator seems to come up actually quite a lot. Basically, for anyone who's not a cavalryman, everyone's used this as a positive trait. So he was an excellent administrator, which is odd, because I don't necessarily think anyone likes being called an excellent administrator as a positive trait. I don't know, but it's really shown up in this.
It's a mark of competence, I guess, isn't it? But the counter issue to this is that if you're in the cavalry, you've got a heck of a lot more administration to do, because you haven't just got to feed the men, you've got to feed the horses. So actually, maybe, is there a prejudice here in that we're talking about all of these cavalrymen being flamboyant because that's a trait that we associate with them? Not so much with Grouchy, but with some of the others. And in the process, we're just kind of blind to the administrative capabilities that you need to be a competent cavalry commander. I'm literally plucking that theory out of the air as I'm saying it, because it's only just occurred to me in light of what you've just said, Sam. But I wonder if that's am I even right? I mean, look, you're the words. You're the logistics expert here. Am I right in making that assumption?
Surely, if you have to dabble in administrations and logistics too heavily, you've got a shit quartermaster.
That is a compelling argument, and perhaps I'm approaching this from a Wellingtonian perspective.
I want to know who the chiefs of staff to the marshals were, actually. I was thinking this yesterday. I want to know who did their admin work, who are their right-hand men. I don't know who they were.
Exactly. Maybe Murat just had an excellent administrator and an excellent quartermaster, and therefore he didn't need to worry about that kind of thing. I don't know. That's probably a PhD in itself. Someone reading into that.
There you go. Josh, let me get your take on Bernadotte.
I think that first of all, that Alex made a very, very strong case. I didn't actually expect him to be able to make such a good case for Bernadotte. Not because I don't respect Alex, but because, to be fair, he's quite a difficult one to say.
Be careful what you say there, because Alex is like the Don of Napoleonic history.
Oh no, I have the highest respect for Alex. It's more that Bernadotte is a difficult guy to say as to pitch as Napoleon's greatest marshal. You know, mostly because he has such a terrible reputation popularly, because he switched sides. However, I think Alex has made a very valid point. He was one of Napoleon's marshals, and how are we actually evaluating greatness? Is it a sort of a milieu? Is it a sort of a ethereal thing? Or is it literally based on what you achieved? And if it's the second, then he does rank very highly, because that shows what the marshalate could do. Under different circumstances, I don't think Bernadotte would have been a massive problem to Napoleon at all. He would have been, he's a Frenchman who is in charge of Sweden. That's a good thing. You know, if 1813 and 14 hadn't happened, then Bernadotte is probably in your corner. It just so happens that he decided that Napoleon is continuing to fight, and it's not in the best interest of Sweden to get pulled down with him. So that's how that occurred. So I think there's a lot of case to reevaluate Bernadotte, and based on the argument, I think there's a case to push him fairly high.
Yeah, I particularly liked Alex's point early on that in the early days, is it Bonaparte or is it Bernadotte? And actually, it's Bernadotte. And this is one of those fascinating what ifs that we are not going to get into, of what if
No.
Bernadotte is the one who curries favor.
You mentioned when we were talking about Jourdan, about Brumaire.
Yeah.
And as far as CA was concerned, and to some extent Barras, Bernadotte was one of 3 contenders for the military consul, essentially.
Indeed. And how different history would have been. I'm not going to labour this because we know my biases on this one, and it would be unfair to devote more time to this than others. But huge thank you to Alex. Lots of people to think about there. We haven't really touched on military capacity, but I think we've used up our time discussing Bernadotte. So think on, folks. Remember that you get your chance to have your say when it comes to the public vote.
We can just say, think of the Trachenberg plan, and we can move on.
There you go. Google is your friend, folks, if you're not sure what he's referring to there. Next up, we are talking about Victor, who I believe is Rachel Stark's least favourite Marshal. I may have got that wrong. I don't know why Rachel has now been dragged into this Marshal roulette. Fantasia. Is it even a Fantasia? I don't even know. The removal of the hat has made no difference to my competence in the course of this podcast. But Chris Kimbell makes the case for, frankly, the most inveterate of looters, Marshal Victor.
Victor's a pretty enigmatic figure among the Marshals, and there's not a huge amount written about him, especially in English. Napoleon himself only had one thing to say of Victor while on St. Helena, and even that was something of a backhanded compliment, namely that the Marshal was better than one might suppose, before going on to praise his efforts at the Berezina. So why do his talents as a general tend to get overlooked? One unfortunate feature of Victor's early career was that several of his most defining moments occurred during battles which Napoleon likewise regarded as among his finest. First at Marengo, where he commanded a pretty stunning delaying action over the course of 4 hours that saw his 2 divisions slow and weaken the surprise assault of a far larger Austrian force. And second at Friedland, where, from his supporting role to Ney's main attack, he sensed the opportunity for a decisive assault that shattered the Russian defence. He thus excelled himself, as Arnold has described it, in battles which Napoleon refused to share with others. One could extend this also to battles in which Victor's decisiveness helped to secure glory for other marshals, as was the case at Montebello, from which Lannes' ducal title was derived. Victor, meanwhile, was saddled with being the Duke of Belluno, or Beautiful Moon, a punning reference to an early nickname, Beau Soleil, and allegedly a joke at the expense of his rather plump legs. All this is despite the not insignificant credit of receiving his marshal's baton in direct response to his feats on the battlefield, the only such appointment that Napoleon made between the original 18 of 1804 and the 3 of 1809. Looking beyond the battlefield for a moment, another major factor in Victor's reputation is, I'd argue, the wider perception of his political activities during the Bourbon Restoration. His vote in favour of Ney's execution in particular, followed by his role in leading one of 2 commissions tasked with investigating the conduct of officers who served under Napoleon in 1815, have left quite the stain on his record. The apparent zeal with which Victor took up these roles has led to characterisations of the Marshal as a quite unscrupulous figure, ready to abandon his once ardent Republican beliefs and turn on those who he'd fought alongside for his own personal gain. Delderfield, in his book on the Marshals, for instance, compares Victor really quite unfavourably with Oudinot, another who refused to side with Napoleon during the 100 Days, as someone for whom it was, quote, not a matter of oaths and duty, but one of self-interest, and the strong streak of snobbery often found in radicals. Besides questions of likability, or even morality, this type of self-interest of which he's accused paints a broader picture of his personality that's fairly unbecoming of a senior commander, and does raise legitimate concerns over the integrity of his decision-making. He was, for instance, known to line his own pockets through plunder, including one ingenious taxation scheme in Erfurt that Chandler links to the Marshal. But just on the question of the Restoration itself, and the possible charge of his fickleness of character, this endorsement of Louis XVIII goes beyond the self-serving gesture taken when he sensed perhaps that Napoleon's luck had run out, astute though such an assessment would have been in any case. He was unguarded in his criticism of Napoleon's coup of 18th Brumaire, which was followed by a period of disgrace in which he lost his command. Given this distance or even suspicion between him and Napoleon, a factor that renders the award of his Marshal's baton all the more notable, a testament of his ability, it's important to look charitably on his support in 1815 for what amounted to a constitutional monarchy, in which he could, to an extent, retain his liberal principles, over endorsing yet another military dictatorship imposed by a coup. Viewed in those terms, there's good reason to be critical of a simplistic characterisation of his behaviour during and after the 100 Days as a regressive abandonment of some long-held belief for personal gain. Certainly not when compared against the wild vacillations of someone like Ney between 1814 and 15, who did unfortunately make it all too easy to be found guilty of treason through his political naivety. The ideal of a constitutional monarchy, after all, really began to gain traction at this time as a progressive solution to the organisation of state, especially in German-speaking Europe. I won't go into too much detail on the Ney affair itself, but again it's important to be critical of those characterisations, which seem to dwell a little too long on Victor's role in the verdict. There were several opportunities to reach a different outcome, not least in the original Council of War assembled by Saint-Cyr to try Ney, which included figures like Jourdan, Massena, Augereau and Mortier, before the whole matter landed with the Council of Peers, where the Royalists naturally had more influence to exert. Returning once more to the spirit of Napoleon's opening comments on Victor then, that he was better than one might suppose, it does feel as though in advocating for the Marshal, one ends up fighting a defensive action of sorts. Moments like his daring assault at the siege of Toulon notwithstanding, he isn't known as the flashiest of generals. There's a lovely extract in Costumier's book on Victor, where he compares the Marshal's simple, clean-shaven appearance with that of Murat in all his finery at Dresden. Another battle, incidentally, where Victor commits his troops in what proves to be the decisive attack that destroys the Allies' left wing. More characteristic of Victor's skill, and demonstrative of perhaps why his talent isn't as recognised, are those less flamboyant, prolonged efforts that demand an astute feel for the ebb and flow of battle, like at Marengo, or more famously, Berezina, where for 2 days he variously delayed and counterattacked Wittgenstein's forces, before typically leading a formed retreat across the river. Although not possessed of a great initiative like that of Davout, that isn't what Napoleon especially seemed to want of his marshals. To the contrary, Victor's greatest strength as a senior commander coincided precisely with that skill which Napoleon described as a general's principal talent, in knowing the mentality of the soldier and gaining his confidence.
The case for Marshal Victor there, brought to us by Chris Kimbell. Victor, the man in Napoleon's shadow. It's an interesting one. I think what I was struck by with this was that it was also true of Davout, that he excelled on occasions where Napoleon wanted to take the limelight, i.e. Jena Auerstadt. You know, Napoleon's the one who writes up Jena as these twin battles, and he's the one who does the lion's share of things, even though it's not, and it's only with the passage of time that people go, hang on a minute, have we looked at what Davout managed to do here? So I was kind of not entirely sold on that. I do think it's a challenge, and we all know that Napoleon did love to take certain elements and rewrite them to a way that suited him. So it is a fair point to make. There's the Spain problem, of course there is. Talavera, that's a mess. That is I mean, sure, people will go, oh, but the night attack came very close. Yes, it did. But half of that army is Spanish. And it's not, Spanish army that's had time to regather and retrain and all the rest of it. Those are not good quality men. They literally get scared by the sound of their own gunfire at one point and run away. So for all that Wellington might have chucked them into the stronger of the options and positions at Talavera, it's still not a good mark to have lost Talavera. Not the flashiest of marshals, that doesn't really surprise me, but Victor likes to plunder. At least I think I've got that right. I think it's Victor who likes to plunder. I'm getting sort of a slight bob from Josh, which reassures me ever so slightly. So I'm unsure on this one. I haven't worked out my ranking for Victor. Some of the others I can be more confident on, and I've got more that I can kind of shout and scream about. But with Victor, I'm a bit kind of in the weeds. I'm not quite sure how I feel. Josh, help me out. Guide me out of this quagmire.
The problem with Victor is that he's a solid middle to low tier marshal that doesn't have the reputation of a lot of the others. He's fairly kind of opaque and is correct as the pitch says. This possibly is to do with the fact he's mostly under the command of Napoleon wherever he is, and wherever he isn't, again, Talavera, he's technically in command, but also the king is there. But the king is there, Joseph is there as well. And, records show that wherever Joseph is, the general in command of the army isn't able to do a great deal. I thought it was a valiant effort to try and boost him up the ladder. I'm just not sure if, as we go on, and in light of some of the other generals we're talking about here, he's going to end up in the top 5, we'll say.
I think that's a fair assessment. Also, folks, do bear in mind that there are 2 wild cards to be chosen out of this, so there will be a final 7. I did half consider going for a 3rd wild card, but I think we will reserve judgment.
He isn't. I mean, Victor is interesting because he's one of the marshals who swaps sides and then stays with Louis. He goes to Ghent with McDonald's and stuff. And I find those guys rather interesting, but again, it's a black mark against him in terms of his loyalty, and it comes back to the greatest marshal of France or greatest of Napoleon's marshals. How is the greatness being measured here?
This is part of the problem. Perhaps the parameters of this exercise weren't clearly enough defined. We have noticed a few other flaws in the way in which the imbecile at the helm of the Napoleonic Wars podcast has put all of this together. Sam, let me get your thoughts on Victor. It's another one where I don't think we've ever had a conversation about the guy, so I'm not really sure where you stand on him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you'll be very unsurprised to hear that obviously I am always mad that he didn't side with Napoleon, but I'm even madder that he voted in favour of Ney's execution.
That's
for
yes.
me, yeah, for me, any military achievements, any military prowess, the fact that he's Minister of War later in life, all of that personally gets swept under the rug because he voted for Ney's execution, and that might not stand with other people because I am 100% willing to say I'm putting an emotional stamp on this, and it's because of one of my other favorite marshals that I don't like this one. So I'm the voice of emotion and anarchy in this. Josh seems to be the one of the calm intellect, and I come in going, no, my favorites are my favorites, and then flip the table for the others. So that's my view on Victor.
I think there's a good point. Good
exactly
point
what I was
about
about to say. But there are 2 ways of thinking about that. For somebody who has stuck with their subsequent pledge to the Bourbon monarchy, you can see why somebody like Ney doing what Ney did actually quite offends Victor's sense of.
We should do a retrial of Ney episode.
That would be fascinating.
Because then we could get into all of this. We could get into, is the death penalty actually something that is valid, or should he just have been exiled or something like that? What we could get into this.
So
Yeah,
Josh has basically planned future content either for the Adventures in Historyland channel or for this podcast. We're not quite sure. We shall reconvene anon, one way or another, on that one. Sam, I cut you off.
That's all right, but the other side of the argument obviously is from someone who has a completely different viewpoint to me. If you are taking it that Victor is demonstrating his integrity by deciding that what's best for France is now the Bourbons, and that he will stick with his loyalty to the side that is now best representative of France, then absolutely he's one of the heroes of that story. I'm on the other side of it, so he's not. But For
But on the
I
on the
understand
flip
I'm in the
side,
minority here, really, for most people.
but on the flip side, do we know that he was thinking of France? Do we know that any of them were thinking of France, or rather thinking that Napoleon has no hope of winning, so I might as well stay with the Bourbons? Their self-interest at play here is not just the fate of France to be considered.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just trying to give him some credit, so it wasn't
Yes,
just
we switched sides there for a second.
This is getting very confusing. I'm not sure my brain can cope with all of this. Next, somebody will be saying that, Murat was an idiot, and it won't be me. We will get there in due course, though, but not just yet. So yeah, Victor, a confusing one. I'm not sure if we've really helped ourselves or our listeners in coming to a conclusion on Victor. But Chris, if nothing else, thank you for giving us a pitch that really made us scratch our heads and try and work out how we felt and all of this. Well, didn't make Sam have to consider how she felt. She was quite emphatic, but
it was
myself
a very good pitch for someone who I don't care about.
there's
He
a
made me-
brutality there.
No, he made me care for the duration of the pitch. I was like, this is a good pitch. And then it got to the end and I remembered that it was Victor and I don't care. But it was a very good pitch. Thank you.
Okie doke. We shall move on to another. Again, we didn't really sort of talk much about military skill besides the Spain problem. And three of these individuals have a Spain problem, but the next one has the least Spanish problem, which is a technical term, of perhaps all the marshals to go to Spain. And we'll debate the reasons for that. But next up, we are talking about Suchet, the one that I think probably the most significant of the ones that people love to forget, which sounds very cryptic, and hopefully unpicking that for us now is Antoni Gumbau.
Now to the Battle of Marshals, I bring you Mariscal Suchet. Why I think he deserves to be considered as one of the best? Because when you are looking for performance in military, you are not looking for the one that is most flamboyant or more dandish, or the one who had better outcomes, like founding a royal dynasty. You look for someone who has the job done. And Suchet had his job done. You see, as he began as a cavalryman, but contrary to the usual talk, he was a smart cavalryman, unlike others. He learns his business during the Napoleonic Wars, fighting side by side under the orders of Napoleon. But when he left to Orient, to Middle East, to Egypt, he remains in Italy, acting as chief of staff of other revolutionary generals, sharing their victories and their miseries. Later on 1800, he has an independent command in the Valley of the Bar, a battle not as known as Marengo or Hohenlinden, but with inferior forces, he was able to tackle an Austrian force that was a quite large one. He could have won his martial baton by then, but I guess that he was not much in politics to get that one in that time. But well, he had the chance to be there in other battles. Austerlitz, Jena. He is not the first name that comes to our mind when we think about those battles, but Suchet plays a role. He is a cog in the Napoleonic war machine. And as such, a needed cog, without whom probably the machine would have worked differently. Then comes his finest hour. He goes to Spain in 1808, and he will take the Third Corps that has suffered a lot in Zaragoza, a force lacking discipline and lacking forces, so demoralized, but he, after some time handling it, he makes the Third Corps a fighting force, which is very important. He's good in field battles, Maria, Belchite, and he's also good in sieges. Not much important or so famous matter in Napoleonic battles, but he's able to take different places. Lérida. He also takes Sagunto, like another old great general did, Hannibal the Great, the Carthaginian one. And he will earn his martial baton after taking Tarragona. A siege, a very difficult siege, because as Napoleon learned in Acre, it's very difficult to besiege a city with a port, especially when you are not in command of the sea. But Suchet was able to take it, and he earned his baton. He earned it in Spain, the only one who did it, and winning this award in a place that became the graveyard of reputation of many marshals that we will talk later. Another good thing about Suchet is his approach to counterinsurgency, which has been reviewed and analyzed in current times by the French military. He had his left hand with the civilian population, trying to avoid looting and living from the train. But he also, when he had to be tough, he was tough, like the time when he shot a drummer who had spread false rumors that led his regiment to panic in front of the whole army. I mean, when he had to be tough, he was tough. We also added he was a good organizer. His troops were always well provided, and as usual, as the trope sometimes says, amateurs look for tactics and strategy, and professionals care for logistics. And Suchet cared for his logistics of his force. Not much of his work is not much known because his theater of operations, the part of Catalonia, Aragon, and Valencia, is a quite neglected one, I think, in Spain, in English-speaking world, English-speaking literature, although Helion recently has done its good share about our good marshal, Suchet. It is even complicated in French literature. I guess that Spain was where most of the flows of the Napoleonic war machine were shown, so that makes Suchet a competent secondary character, but competent nevertheless. And about English, the English presence in that theater of operations was minimal and with a wide room of improvement. So I guess that that helps that it's not much talked about in English literature. Later on, as the fortunes of the empire started to fade, he led an organized retreat to the Pyrenees that didn't become a route, which I think making a retreat not become a route is the good mark of the good general. So I think that it must be put in value. He served the Bourbons, but later served Napoleon in the 100 days. But as Napoleon blundered it in Waterloo, he was unable to prove his mettle against the Austrians. And well, I would like to finish just saying that if most of times the importance of a general is could be valued by the worth given by his enemies. And Marshal Suchet, when he died, the citizens of Zaragoza, both poor and rich, prayed in the Cathedral of El Pilar in Zaragoza for the rest of his soul. And I think that such compliment coming from an enemy is a worth measure of his pride, worth, and mettle. And I think that's it. Thanks for your time. Best of luck to all the contenders. Thanks again. Have a nice day. Bye.
Antoni Gumbau there, making the case for Suchet. This was an interesting one. You know, willing to make the tough decisions. Yes, that is something that you need as a marshal. Does that necessarily make you the greatest marshal? I think a few were willing to make tough decisions, so I'm ambivalent there. Much more successful when it came to counterinsurgency in Spain than most of the others, except perhaps Soult. But Soult, I feel, was much more inclined towards Iron Fist, but I have a feeling there was a bit of an Franz de Sado, that was an attempt at Spanish pronunciation, more Francophile I have a feeling that the population in the south of Spain was a little bit more Francophile. So that might have helped his case. Please correct me, peeps, if I'm wrong. He's got a decent battlefield record, but he's not famous. And I think there's a trouble for quite a few of these marshals. I know our good friend of the show, Geraint Thatcher, will be saying, yes, but look, what's to say that he couldn't have beaten Wellington? But equally, we have Josh Provan in the room who will turn around and say, yes, but what is there to say that he could have beaten Wellington? It's almost like you and I have had this conversation before, Josh, multiple times. So where am I with Suchet? I think he's top third, perhaps, of the marshals. Do I think he's the greatest? Do I think he eclipses somebody like a Soult, or even perhaps a Massena? No, but does he have that problem that Josh flagged last time of being one of the later marshals? I mean, look, he gets an independent command, so there's that in his favour. Josh, I'm basically starting to sort of steal ideas from you, so I'm going to shut up at this point and hand the baton over to you so you can actually say something.
Well, thank you very much. But you could have continued. I don't mind. It's flattering for to have one's material used. Just to put the citation at the bottom. It's all good. Chicago manual. But Suchet is both easy and problematic. It's a strong pitch for a strong underdog. People love an underdog. People love the ones like Davout was an underdog. People didn't really clock him outside of actual French historians until quite recently. Suchet is somewhat of the same. He's the shining star or wannabe shining star of Spain because he's the only guy who gets a baton in Spain. He might be the only one with a Spanish title as a result of it as well. And so you have this idea that he was better than the other marshals who are in Spain. However, if you're looking at his reputation tactically as a general, he did not fight Wellington. He maneuvered around Wellington and caused him some problems at one point. That's about it. And he actually has a rather poor reputation. There's a siren now going on, I'm sorry. That he rather has a poor reputation against British troops in southern Spain. The battle that he fights against the British does not go terribly well. And he is one of the few marshals to have the shame of being defeated in the field by a Spanish army. And
those are two really good points, and I'm slightly ashamed that they didn't occur to me, but you're dead right. You know what, the folks in command in that section of Spain are not your Wellingtons. They're not even close. And nonetheless, he doesn't do particularly well on the battlefield. Yes, does well in terms of ruling that part of Spain. But yeah, that's a really good point to ponder on. These are the kinds of reasons why I brought you guys in to have this conversation.
And it's not just the British. In 1815, yes, he does have only a moderate amount of troops. He's in southern France. He's engaged by the Austro-Sardinians, and he's supposed to be able to hold the passes against them, or should have been trying to hold the passes against them, but he fails to do so, and he gets driven onto the plain. And essentially, he is unable to operate because his army is too small once they're out in the open. It's not going to go well for him for the rest of that campaign. It ends before he can be actually defeated. He does okay. He's a talented soldier and a good administrator, and arguably good governor material. For running a province or something like that. But I'm not sure if we're looking at the heavy hitters here, if Suchet actually has this sort of aura about him that is a little skin deep.
It pains me to say this, but Josh has just convinced me to reconsider my provisional rankings. The very compelling case actually made that. I'm sorry, Antoni, because you made a very valiant pitch.
Yes, I'm not. Am I supposed to be doing this? Is it?
Well, no, this is the point of the conversation, isn't it? Because I did scribble in my notes. You know, is Suchet the dark horse of this competition? Now I'm not so sure that he is. Actually, Sam, let me get your thoughts.
I don't think I have very much to add, to be honest. And Josh made some excellent points there. And then the only other thing I noticed, and some people may argue whether this matters, but he's not really involved in that many big ticket battles.
He's like a colonel and stuff in the First Italian campaign. It takes him a while to get where he is. He's pretty like field rank in the First Italian campaign. He's in it, but he's never promoted above the others. Other people get the job before he does, and it's literally because he takes, is it Tarragona or something like that? That he gets the baton.
Okay, some really interesting points. Sam, is there a song about Suchet? Because these are the important things to consider alongside other things, right?
I haven't written one, no.
Okay. Well, think on. Maybe you'll compose something between now and the end of the session, and if so, do let us know. So thank you, Antoni, for that pitch on Suchet. It's given us these are all giving us a lot to think about, really, aren't they? Which is a credit to the strength of the pitches from all of those who've contributed. And it's worth remembering, folks, that sure you've got people like Ed Carson and Alex Mikaberidze contributing, but you've also got people who and this isn't anything against them. These folks aren't historians. They might have done it at university. They might have just picked up a book because they're interested. And every single one of these pitches was quality. Really made you stop and think and was steeped in the history and didn't just turn around and do what I dreaded might happen, which was that people might just read off a list of what they did in their life. That's not what's happened. We've been forced to sort of pause and think about the merits and the counter merits. So huge kudos to everybody who's taken part, and thank you for returning that kind of leap of faith in terms of putting this out there to the inverted commas fan base. There isn't much of a fan base for this show. Have you listened to the damn thing? But we're going to come to the final pitch. And actually, I think my assessment on this one might surprise you. Next up, and Sam smiles knowingly, but actually, I might yet shock you. Sam, next up, John Viscardo makes the case for Murat.
Hello, everyone. This is John with the Generals and Napoleon podcast. And I'm super thrilled to tell you why I like this Marshal Murat. He is, in my opinion, one of the top 3 marshals in terms of directly affecting Napoleon's career. Yeah, I said it, top 3. His actions, both good and bad, had huge ramifications on the emperor's career. I can think of at least 3 instances where Murat saved Napoleon's bacon, but we'll get to that. Murat was a fearless man, often leading cavalry charges with nothing but a riding crop in his hand. Why a riding crop? Well, his job wasn't to fight one-on-one with other cavalrymen from the enemy army. His job was to lead thousands of men in one direction and plow through the enemy line. Somehow the marshal knew his end wouldn't come on a battlefield. He was also a stylish man, dressing his troopers and retinue and himself in the finest and most flamboyant fashions in Europe. It seems everyone who met him was awestruck by his daring uniforms and outfits. Some made fun of him, including the emperor and his fellow marshals, but he seemed not to care. Once, during a military review in Poland, Murat dressed in such a garish uniform that Napoleon remarked he looked like a circus rider and instructed him to go put on his proper uniform. During his early years, he gained a reputation as a handsome swordsman and was reputed to have been in 6 duels in just 1 year. But it was his role in the 1795 revolt in Paris that he would make his first big impression on the emperor. During the famous 13 Vendemiaire uprising, when a royalist mob tried to overthrow the Directory government, Napoleon was given full command of Paris and was ordered to suppress this revolt. This would be the first instance of Murat saving Napoleon's bacon. Napoleon knew the best way to scatter a mob was with, quote, a whiff of grape shot, end quote. So he sent Murat and his cavalry troopers to fetch the cannons from the artillery park. Murat dashed hell for leather on his horse, grabbed the vital cannon batteries just before the mob got there to do the same. He galloped back with these cannons, and Napoleon set up fields of fire to smash the violent mob. The rest, as they say, is history. Murat helped Napoleon save the day and save the Directory government. Throughout Napoleon's famous Italy campaign in 1796 and 1797, Murat was at every major battle: Dago, Mondovì, Rivoli, Bassano, leading cavalry charges into the teeth of the enemy. He was also a major force in the Egyptian campaign. At the 1799 Battle of Abu Qir, Murat and his cavalry smashed the center of the Ottoman lines. Murat's charge was so quick that he burst inside the enemy commander's tent, Mustafa, severing 2 of his fingers with a saber. In return, Mustafa shot Murat in the jaw. Murat was operated on and resumed his duties the next day. The Battle of Abu Qir was a huge victory for the French, inflicting 18,000 casualties against only 800 casualties for Napoleon's army. Murat's work in the 1805 Ulm campaign was also impressive. Murat and his cavalry reserve provided a nice feint against the Austrians. This occupied General Mack as Napoleon fell upon his rear and ultimately surrounded the enemy, causing their eventual capitulation. His later bit of cheek with Marshal Lannes in capturing a vital bridge into Vienna was also an impressive maneuver. A few years later, in 1807, Murat saved the day again for the emperor. It was a snowy, cold massacre of a battle at Eylau, and for once, Napoleon was caught on the wrong foot. After the Russians destroyed Marshal Augereau's entire corps, they pressed their attack. As Napoleon's center was collapsing, the emperor rode up to Murat and asked him to charge. The fearless Murat launched his 11,000 cavalry troopers in one of the most famous charges in history. The large wave of horses and troops smashed into the Russian lines, causing much devastation, and turned a potential rout of Napoleon into a draw of a battle. Second time, Bacon was saved. As a reward for his service and to appease his demanding sister Caroline, Murat was given the Neapolitan throne in Italy. On his throne in Naples, he was referred to as the Dandy King due to his fancy clothing. Although he was born of modest means, he maintained a royal bearing, always confident, always ready for the next adventure. When Napoleon was assembling the largest army ever for his 1812 invasion of Russia, he insisted on, quote, the finest cavalry leader in the world, quote, to join him. Even after the disastrous retreat from Russia, Murat remained loyal to the emperor, serving in the 1813 German campaign. His work at the 1813 Battle of Dresden could be considered the third time he saved Napoleon's bacon. A French participant observed, quote, Murat, cut off by the Austrian Army Corps, hurled himself upon it at the head of his carbineers and cuirassiers. Nearly all of the Austrian Corps commanders' battalions were compelled to lay down their arms, and 2 other divisions of infantry shared their fate. End quote. Yes, Murat made his mistakes. His violent suppression of Madrid caused a nationwide uproar against the invading French. His lack of energy on the retreat from Russia was uninspiring, and his turning against Napoleon in 1814 was disgraceful. But overall, I believe he was more beneficial than detrimental to the emperor. One book says that Murat fought in over 200 combats, and yet lived through all of them. He also returned to the emperor's side in 1815 in fighting against the Austrians in Italy. Unfortunately, his army was routed, and he lost his throne and later his life to a firing squad. So in the end, he was indeed serving the efforts of Napoleon and died for the French cause, even if it was indirectly. He was a brilliant leader of men, even if he wasn't that clever of a man, and his troops would follow him anywhere, and Napoleon was lucky to have him.
John Viscardo there making the case for Murat. We all know my stance when it comes to Murat. I do rather love that all balls and no brains line from Rachel Stark. Yes, he does save Napoleon. That's kind of his job, though, I would say. That is literally the point of all of these guys. Doesn't matter who they are, whether it's Davout, whether it's, that they're being sent with a task, which is to go and do Napoleon's work where Napoleon can't be. So he's dead right, and I'm pleased that he did pick out the whiff of grape shot instant, because Napoleon's the one who gets the credit, but actually it's Murat who does the legwork. If folks are wondering, the whiff of grape shot comment comes from Thomas Carlyle. It's actually a phrase that's coined after the event. It's not Napoleon's own words, but for all that it's Napoleon who benefits from that moment, actually it's Murat who facilitates it. So a really nice point there. Nobody can question that the guy was stylish. My God, has anybody in history rocked an ostrich feather better? I will freely admit it. And time again, I openly admit to the fact that I am deeply jealous of his thigh and, quite frankly, his buttock game. I cannot pull off breeches in the way that Murat can, and I resent it. There you go. I've said it. He is not the greatest judge of character, in my opinion. I would say time and time again, Lannes has what Murat lacks. So if you want a straight fight between Lannes and Murat, I'm going to put Lannes further up the list every single time. I completely agree with what John said at the end there. Napoleon was lucky to have him. Yes, he was, without a shadow of a doubt. And yes, you need a Murat somewhere within your army. I'm just not sure you necessarily need them as a marshal. I can understand why you would give somebody like Murat that status, because it encourages a certain type of behavior amongst your troops, which is beneficial to a point on the battlefield. But for me, perhaps the most fatal flaw when it comes to Murat is that he basically co-starts a war. Dos de Mayo. Without Dos de Mayo, the Peninsular War potentially doesn't become the apocalyptic conflict for Spain and for France that it goes on to become, because you can understand the resentment on the behalf of the Spanish people. I can also, on one level, understand Murat's response, but to be so brutally suppressive takes the embers and then pours petrol on them, quite frankly. And that is Murat's fault. Murat is the one who explodes the Peninsular War, which makes it so hard for the French to try and then they can't put it back in the box. He literally opens the Pandora's box of the Peninsular War. And that, for me, is an unforgivable mistake, because he is meant to be there as the guy in control. He's meant to be Napoleon's representative. He is the one who's meant to keep things dampened down, and he doesn't do that. He fans the flames by poor judgment, by being all balls, being that full-on cavalryman, and not using that brain of his. So there you go. There's my takedown of Murat. John, you made a fantastic pitch. You knew I was going to tear this one apart because it's Murat. But I will say this. He's still a contender because he's probably in the top 10. Even despite the fact that I don't like him when it comes to Murat, I still say that he's in the top 10 of the greatest marshals because he has talents that you need. There you go. There is my surprise. Sam, is your mouth agog at this revelation?
Not hugely. Obviously, I completely agree with your evaluation of his role in Spain. But I think that Murat basically did, other than that, when he's being the cavalry brash marshal, he did exactly what he needed to be. He knew who he was, he knew where he was there, and he did it well. Because it comes back to that point I briefly made in one of the earlier discussions, in that if every single marshal was the same, it wouldn't have worked. You need those different elements of a team. If the entire if the entire marshalate were all Davoos, it would have probably been just as bad as if the entire marshalate were all Murats. You need that variety, you need that those different skill sets, and he has this massive legacy. Most of the pitches we've had over the last 3 or 4 episodes, they have all pretty much, over half of them, 75% of them, have had a reference to Murat in there. My responses to most of them have also had some kind of reference to Murat in there. There has always been, oh, well, my guy wasn't all balls and no brain like Murat. His legacy just permeates the entire marshalate. Even if you're not actually meant to be talking about him, he's still there. And I think that certainly has to be considered.
I think my rankings on this are going to surprise people at the end of this episode. Josh, let me get your thoughts.
I agree. I think that it comes back to greatness again. I think actually, yeah, John had a good subject, someone he legitimately pitched for and did a good job. He could have gone further, actually, I think. Murat, especially, is one of those guys, if you look at a sort of a sliding scale, he's like it starts very high and decreases in terms of his effectiveness or like his capability. Let's say it doesn't get better. It sort of peaks at a certain point, peaks at Eylau or something like that, and then drops. But in those early years, he's the guy who the great in at Brumaire and cleared the room for Napoleon. He was the guy on the spot there. He was in Egypt. He was charging, you want to take on the Mamelukes, you need France's greatest cavalryman, and that's Murat. And is LaSalle objectively a better soldier on horseback? Probably yes. But what is the greatness we're talking about here? And it's sort of like what Sam was saying. He is unquestionably great. Like, in terms of the Marshals, he's probably top 3 in terms of the ones people remember. He is, and is that for cosmetic reasons? Possibly. But it's also because he's one of the few Marshals who, if you don't have him, a lot of stuff changes. If he's not there at Eylau, sure, Bessier needs to be back there with the Imperial Guard, but who else is just going to organize 10,000 cavalrymen and say, right, we're going in, boys? Other cavalry commanders may not have been able to get his men to do that. And he's also in First Italy. He's legitimately capturing regiments of men with like 12 hussars and stuff like that. And so as a soldier, he is actually the real deal. It's also a myth that all cavalrymen are idiots, because you have to have a special sort of horse intelligence when it comes to being the cavalry. You have to be a different type of soldier. You have to have a sort of understanding, just at a base level. Cavalry cannot hold ground; they can only take it. That in itself builds on what cavalrymen need to understand about reserves and timing and cavalry charges and all the stuff that Alan Mallinson very properly says the work of cavalry goes largely unobserved. They're the eyes and ears of the army. They're the pursuit of the enemy. They are doing a lot of stuff. And Murat, he posed for the portraits and stuff, but up to a certain point, he was the real deal. My biggest problem with Murat isn't even Dostimayo, because I don't think many of the French marshals would have handled that particularly well. I think that his biggest problem is Russia. And whereas Napoleon had cause to leave the army, Murat had much less cause to leave the army. And that's one of the big problems with him. He is legitimately one of Napoleon's greatest marshals, and you can sort of make fun of him all you want, but the problem is it is just true.
He is certainly an easy target, and I'm very guilty of taking pot shots at that easy target. That buttock is hard to miss. But You do make a really good point, and if nothing else, right, Murat's story, as both of you are saying, it captures the popular imagination. And I do think you have to, because this was my rant about the Ridley Scott film, which no, don't worry, I'm not about to embark on yet again. But Murat is there's a Napoleonic element, a Napoleon-esque element to Murat's story because of that flamboyance and because he was balls without much brains. I stand by that. And people like that. So if nothing else, you've got to give Murat kudos for services to Napoleonic history.
He
And
he had big ideas as well when he was king of Naples. He's remembered in Italy as one of the first guys who comes up with a unifying idea after Napoleon himself. Um, like I said, by that point, he's definitely showing his weaknesses in terms as a leader, but it's still an interesting thought. He's very involved in Italian history and the way that Italian history goes after the Napoleonic Wars as well.
yeah, there are different legacies with Murat, aren't there? I suppose that's what we're getting at, that by the traditional measure, no, he doesn't stack up against some of the others. Um,
And I guess we also have to admit as well, in terms of bias, we said about Ney, he died tragically, and that colors how we think of him. We do have to remember that Murat has a similar ending. He dies tragically and heroically, and he's a similarly kind of grassroots marshal who goes to heights that normal people don't get to. And so, on the other hand, you can't, let's be realistic at the same time. But the problem is he is just legitimately one of Napoleon's greatest marshals. You ask anybody on the street, name 3 marshals, Murat will be one of them.
if they know who Napoleon was, which
Well,
certainly
that
after
helps
the Ridley
too. But
Scott film, I'm not sure they will. But we mustn't make this about Ridley Scott. John, genuinely, because you will be listening to this, thank you for that. A more mellow assessment from me than I think perhaps people were expecting, and the shocks will keep on coming when it comes to the next thing that we need to do, which is to rank these people. Now, I have the casting vote here. I've scribbled down my assessment already, which I'll reveal in due course. Josh, we're going to come to you first. What's your ranking?
I'm basing this on, to some extent, purely on what the pitches, whether the pitches persuaded me or not. And I think that it's Bernadotte, Murat, Suchet, and Victor in
Interesting.
this heat.
Okay. Okay. Sam smiles knowingly in
Mine's
response to
exactly
that.
the same. Exactly the same in the exact order. Bernadotte, Murat, Suchet, Victor.
Do you know what? The only point that I disagree with you two on,
Oh dear.
but I'm outvoted, so I have to. This is the first time this has happened. I cannot be the voice of reason because you two are the voice of reason. That is tragically democracy. I can see why Bonaparte didn't like it now. But I went Bernadotte as number 1, Murat as number 2. So yes, I agree with you in terms of those relative stakes. I then put Victor as 3, but Suchet as 4, and that was a change in my thinking as a result of what Josh was saying. So it's Josh's fault that I changed my mind. Otherwise, we would have been in unanimous agreement. But there you go. That is the ruling of the judging panel. So Bernadotte gets 5 points, Murat 4. Murat would not be happy about coming second to Bernadotte. I'm
No.
quite enjoying that concept.
Don't make me change my mind. I did this because I was trying to think logically and because Alex convinced me. Don't make me change my mind with your shade. No, I betrayed Murat for him. But your favorite, you owe me.
Okay, that's me told. Clearly we know who's behind the drinks after this. So yes, Bernadotte 5, Murat 4, Suchet 3, and Victor 2 points. But folks, remember that is only part of the story because the public vote is now open, except that you don't have to pay to vote like you do when it comes to I'm a Celebrity. Although apparently you can vote for free via the app. I really should have worked on an app. I haven't got the time to work on an app. to hell with that. That was a dumb idea. Don't make me go down that rabbit hole, people. But folks, if you're watching on YouTube, all you need to do is type the name of your favorite Marshal in the comments, which is inevitably going to lead to many, many comments in my notifications where people just go at me, which I did not think through. But you have the opportunity to do that if you're watching this on YouTube. If you are listening to this podcast on Spotify or Anchor, you will have the facility to just scroll down. There are questions beneath, well, there's a voting tool beneath the episode itself. So you can log your vote that way, and I'll be able to pick that up. Or you can head over to Twitter, where there will be a public poll. The winner of the public poll gets 4 points, the second place 3 points, and so on down the remainder of the list. But there might be issues with the mathematics as a result of all of that, and frankly, I should have worked this out better. But we won't go there. You can listen to my mini breakdown on those issues in another episode. Massive thank you once again to those who put in pictures for this heat. Alex Mikaberidze making the case for Bernadotte, Chris Kimbell for Victor, Antoni Gumbau for Suchet, and John Viscardo for Murat. Big thanks again to my judges, Sam Jolly, curator of the Royal Logistic Corps Museum at Worthy Down at Winchester, and Josh Proven, master of the Adventures in Historyland YouTube channel and author of Bullock's Grain and Good Madeira and Every Hazard and Fatigue. We will be back for the final heat very soon.
Folks, if you've enjoyed this show, please do me a favor. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a 5-star review. If you're not a regular listener, remember to hit that subscribe button so you can find your way back. All of those things are incredibly powerful in helping this show to reach a wider audience. Much love, as ever, to all my Patreon supporters. Shout outs to my Mentioned in Dispatches patrons, Rob Griffith, Brendan Teeling, Beatrice de Graaf, Lynn Dawson, Jamie Kingston, Lucy Tatner, Jim Deary, Josh Keeney, Colin Fieldhouse, Stephen Coulson, Jim Getz, Stephen Gillen, Hugh Brennan, Alistair Campbell-Grieve, Andy Meakin, Mark Anscombe, Rob Coughlin, Bruins Girl, Noah Fink, Mark Trowbridge, Miles Reedy, Nick Overland, Graham Goodwin, Chris Pramas, Antoni Gumbau, Anonymous American, Martin Pisani, James Fluick, Natasha Hobday, Rod Schwager, Chris Kimball, Gary Dennis, David Graylick, Ted Andrews, David Milinski, Richard Anderson, Arthur Forgy, Sam Moore, Wyatt Pollock, Carol Dixon-Smith, Roland Shark, Giovanni, Jean-Baptiste Merlon, and Darla Vincent. And the Admirals, John Haynes, Ryan Diamond, JC Kaiser, Bob Burnham, Mike Guest, Liam Telfer, Todd and Ned Campbell, Rachel Stark, Mark Duckers, David Maxwell, David Priest, Graham Callister, Sean Sullivan, Stephen Ashworth, Dan Hazelwood, Kate Walcombe, Clemens Beman, Charles McKay, Reto the Sci-Fi Fan, Tim Day, Mark Chestnut, and Jason Morn. I'll be back very soon, but until then, I'm Zach White. This has been the Napoleonic Wars Pod. Take care of yourselves, my friends. Stay well, stay safe, and as always, thank you for listening.
Thank you.